Let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism can be found in professional and academic settings, as well as in industry. In most cases, plagiarism is rarely black or white. You may think that plagiarism is copying someone else's work and passing it off as your own, and it is. This is called intentional plagiarism. It's wrong, dishonest, and we're going to go ahead and say, just don't do it. But it's not always that simple. A lot of the time it's unintentional. This is called unintentional plagiarism. You've probably done it. Your friends have probably done it. Aunts, uncles, exes, the family fish. Okay, maybe not the family fish, but you get the point. It's really easy to unintentionally use someone else's work as your own. But it's up to you to find out what's appropriate for your situation and to keep up with the guidelines. For example, have you ever messed up a citation, forgotten a quotation mark, reused an idea for an essay you wrote last year? Yes, there is such thing as self-plagiarism. And it is just as bad. This is when you take your own idea and duplicate it in another work without referencing yourself. In this day and age, we are surrounded by external stimuli, bombarded by the media, advertisements, graphics, the music industry. These things consciously and subconsciously leave their impressions on us. In a moment of inspiration and awe, you may think that the jackpot idea for a blog post or a painting or an assignment suddenly just hit you. But in reality, it was something you read earlier that morning or saw on TV a year ago. So, how do we avoid unintentional plagiarism? Well, it's always important to use quotation marks when taking directly from another source. Remember to paraphrase, but don't just rearrange or replace a few words. Obviously, use common sense. Give credit where it's due. Include a bibliography or a list of references. Research your original idea to see if it's actually original. When in doubt, always provide a reference. It's always better to over-reference than accidentally miss something. But what happens if plagiarism does occur? What then? Every educational institution has its own way of dealing with plagiarism. The consequences are generally severe if it's determined to be intentional, but it can also be just as bad even if the plagiarism was unintentional. But what if you've made it out to the adult world? No one can give you an F or call your parents to reprimand you. Things get a little complicated at this point. You see, plagiarism deals with ideas, intangible things that are hard to measure. This is because ideas take many forms. It can be words that aren't written down. It can be a couple stabs of music. It can be a simple doodle or even an architectural feat. Generally, plagiarism is something you hear about in creative communities like the music, art, or literature people. Usually, it's in the form of a copyright dispute. The general rule of thumb is that 25% of the artwork can be copied. This rule also applies for 10% of music and 10% of literature. Copyright holders are the only ones who can reproduce a work, create derivatives from that work, and distribute or perform the work in public. Only tangible things are copyrightable, so copyright infringement is not plagiarism. For example, if you claim to be the author of Hamlet, you're not infringing on any copyrights, because the play is in the public domain and not protected, but you are plagiarizing. Very occasionally, unavoidable things do happen. 1 hour before Alexander Graham Bell submitted his patent for the first telephone, Elisha Gray submitted his. Now here's the interesting part. Gray went on to invent the first electronic musical instrument using vibrating steel rods. At the same time, Bell invented the electric harp. These men did not communicate with each other and yet came up with extraordinarily similar inventions simultaneously. What do we do then? How do we determine whether or not there's been any plagiarism? There's no surefire way. Turnitin released a statement saying, "Turnitin does not detect plagiarism. It finds text that matches other sources in the vast Turnitin databases and shows those matches. It's up to the human being to determine whether those text matches are a problem or not. In other words, it takes a human to really know. You could be on YouTube looking for inspiration for a new beat, or on Facebook or Twitter looking for the next hip status to post. Whether or not your work is plagiarized is best known by you. If you're really unsure, you could always check your school's plagiarism policy or your workplace policy if that's applicable. The most important thing to take away is that the area between what is plagiarism and what is acceptable is vast and risky. It's always better to be on the safe side. Inspiration is okay, but always produce work from scratch, just in case. Students spend hours trying to beat Turnitin, often more time than actually writing their essay. Don't try this. It will not work. Trying to beat Turnitin is like trying to avoid death and taxes. Avoid plagiarism instead. It's easier.